Welcome back, my friends. This is Alex Pardo, and guys, I get to interview some of the top minds within our space in the real estate investor community. And full transparency, this is the first time that David Olds and I are having a conversation. So he is somebody who his reputation precedes him. He's been around for a while. He works with some of the top real estate investors in the country with his business and with his company, Easy REI Closings. So with that being said, guys, we are going to focus today's podcast episode around a topic that, David, I don't know if you're going to agree or disagree with this statement, but I feel like dispositions and transaction coordination doesn't get enough attention, doesn't get enough, there's not enough content out there around the areas of dispositions. And I feel like all the attention and energy goes towards like marketing and acquisition and sales and all that, and with good reason, but dispositions is just as important as acquisitions because you know they're married together. And then taking it a step further, if you've been in this business, you've probably experienced the pain of getting to the closing table. You've already kind of counted your profits, and then something gets fumbled at the last minute, whether it be with the paperwork or whether it be with the title company or maybe the buyer, the seller. Something happens where your deal doesn't get to the finish line. And David has built a business to ensure that that doesn't happen, or that all the risk are everything is being done on the back end to make sure that all the energy, money, time, effort you put into getting these deals closed actually close. So, brother, with that being said, man, welcome to the podcast.
No, man, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. As I said, I've known about you and followed you for a long time, so I'm super excited to get to do this. And the girls in the office were like, "You're going on." You're going on. It's going to be a big podcast. Make sure you're ready. And of course, I was a couple minutes late. But I appreciate it. I think everything you said in the beginning is absolutely right. For a lot of reasons, our industry focuses more on the front side of the business, the marketing and pay-per-click and bandit signs and cold calling and text messaging and all of that, and acquisitions, because that's where most people start. But 100%, I would argue that if you do not understand the second half of the business, which is how to sell your deal, then you're 100% you're going to struggle. And I think people, sort of muddle through that first part and then just do the best they can to sell their deal and post it on Facebook or, whatever strategy there is. And the worst thing, I used to coach dispositions for some really high level teams. The worst things that I would ever hear are, if you just have a good contract or a good deal, it'll sell. And I'm like, what a bunch of nonsense. I could have the greatest deal ever written on a piece of paper sitting here on my desk, and it's not going to sell unless I do something, right? And that's where the marketing to, sell your deal comes in. And the way that was always just the side of the business that I gravitated more towards. I love talking to buyers. I mean, I'll talk to sellers and I can do it, but I don't love it, right? I had a partner or, I had somebody else who handled that in my business. But, the way that I always approached dispositions, which made me really successful, was, we are very aggressive about going out and finding a buyer. The same way that people are, very, hardcore on finding sellers, right? We would build buyer profiles, and, we learned how to drop into any market on any day and, and find the people who are actually buying. And this was before things like Investor Lift and all that came out, right? Like, we figured out good marketing and just, who was going to be our buyer. So that was a little bit how kind of I got into this side of the business. And then, after doing a lot of that and scaling up my company to where we had, almost 20 people here in the office, and we were doing deals in like 30 states, so just about nationwide. You have to get good at transactions and doing those types of deals. So, as a wholesaler, I did over 1,640 something deals, I think was our last count. So a lot of them over a lot of years. I started wholesaling in 2009. So you've got to figure out how to get these deals closed, right? Because again, just even finding a seller and then finding a buyer, getting it over the finish line can be a struggle. And what we do know as an industry, kind of industry insiders know, that 40% of the deals that are contracted with a seller will never close.
That's right.
Right. That's the number. Like, people don't talk about it a lot because it, they don't want to deter people from getting into the business. But I would rather look at that and say, okay, what can we do to bring that number down? And of that 40% of deals, and some people will say it's as high as 50. And again, there's going to be differences between virtual and local people, right? That's like, because I don't want the one guy being like, I close 90% of my deals. I close 90% of my deals when I was just here in Chattanooga. When we went virtual though, Like that's a different model. That's really a different business. So the blend between the two is somewhere between 40 and 50. But of those deals that die, right, a solid 50% of that portion dies because it was contracted too high, right? Because we're doing this over the phone. Maybe your acquisitions guy isn't asking the right questions. How's the kitchen? Oh, the kitchen's great. And they just move on instead of like, hey, well, tell me a little bit about it. Oh, well, it's just really 1950s plywood cabinets and a green countertop with metal banding around it. And anybody who's rehabbed a house knows that that's going to have to be torn out. So maybe they don't account for that in their number. Then they send it out to their buyers, and their buyers are like, bro, you're 40 grand high, right? So there's a lot of that. But the other equal side, and sometimes I think it's more, are title issues, right? There's title problems because what do we do as investors, right? First off, our job is clearly we should be out here helping people. We shouldn't be screwing anybody over. But we go out and we look for people with distress or properties with distress. So what are the things that we look for? Death, divorce, taxes, bankruptcy, foreclosure, bad tenants, water shut off, all of those things. And those are title problems, right? So it's great because the more of those problems you can solve, the deeper a discount you can get, right? The lower you can have it, the faster it's going to sell to your buyer. But then to get that deal closed, right, what do we also promise all of our buyers? Clear title, proration of taxes. Well, you have to clear up all of those things. So that's where I see all of those deals die because nobody gets into this business to learn how to do a monumental title, right? It's just nobody read Rich Dad Poor Dad and said, God, I want to be a title abstractor. I can't wait to go dig through dusty books and then track down this deed from 1932. Yeah. So that's somehow I became fascinated with the second half of the business, and that's where I've kind of lived for the last few years.
I love it. Well, man, good for you because you're a smart man. It seems to me from this side of the mic and of the screen that you've created yourself a niche where everybody has zigged, you've zagged, and you've created a service that really helps real estate investors make sure that, again, all the time, energy, money that they're putting into the marketing and acquisition side of the business is not for nothing. Yeah. Right. And to think that 40 to 50% on average, right? Again, there's going to be people out there that are like, Alex, David, I'm crushing it, right? Like 100% of my deals get to the closing table.
But there's also people who lose 80% too. It's like, there's the other end of the spectrum.
I hear you. There's so much to unpack, and I love the fact that you just ripped for 5-6 minutes because there was so much wisdom in everything you shared. So I'm going to encourage people to go back and rewind and listen to that. But a couple things I want to just big picture zoom out and share with people. One of the mistakes that I have found, and early on in my journey, like I was guilty of this, I find that when wholesalers finally get a deal under contract, they almost become motivated sellers. Yeah. And it's almost like they rush to like get the email out and get the text out and start calling their top buyers and all that. You talked early on when you first started sharing about you focused on how to sell these deals. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that you said, David, one of the biggest myths is that these deals will sell themselves. Mm-hmm. I think that's a prevailing thought amongst a lot of real estate investors that they think a really good deal will do the heavy lifting. How should people listening and watching this podcast approach sales when it comes to the disposition side of the business?
Yeah, so again, I've coached a lot of big teams, and one thing I love to draw on the board is a timeline, right? Like the timeline of a deal, right? It starts with marketing and ends with the day you get paid. And we'll kind of work through, what does that process look like in very broad strokes? And when you get to the point of dispositions, for us, let me just tell you how my company operated, Nationwide Property Liquidators. We operated at a very high level. So that deal would come over to the dispo side, we would re-underwrite it, we would look at it one more time. But because now we're looking at everything from the buyer's point of view, right? So again, I get it, man. I've been there, dude. When I got my first contract, I went to cartwheel down Main Street naked, right? Like I was just so excited, right? So I get that. Oh, I just want to get this thing under contract. But when you step back and have to look at it and go, okay, what is it that my buyer wants? Because even on that timeline, right, the end is you get paid, like this deal lives on, right? Yeah. It goes, like the house doesn't just magically disappear. So what happens to it next? Well, my buyer needs to make money off of this deal somehow, right? Either they're going to rehab it and sell it, they're going to knock it down, develop the land, they're going to turn it into a rental, short-term rental, student rental, whatever it is, right? Like the deal lives on. So how does that buyer make money? And this is the thing that it mystifies me. I would go into some of the biggest offices in the country and I would sit and talk to their acquisitions people, and they wouldn't necessarily understand like contracting these properties from the buyer's point of view, right? So when I'm talking to, and we'll get to Dispo in just a second, but like, again, everything is a sales funnel, right? If I put watermelons on the top of my funnel, grapefruits are not going to come out, right? It's, so I always like my acquisitions people to understand, okay, let's do a for instance. Okay, there's a tenant in the property. Great. How long is left on the lease? They're month to month. Perfect. Because now I can evaluate this thing as a rehab or as a future rental, right? But if I'm talking to them and there's 11 months left on the lease, well, now I know my only buyer is going to be a landlord. What do landlords in Columbus, Ohio, what rent multiplier, what is the criteria that buyer is going to be looking for? Could be completely different if the new buyer could toss these people out after a month, give them notice, right? And then now they could rehab it, or now they have multiple options. So very important for acquisitions to understand and look at that and say, okay, who would be my buyer? Why would they want to buy this? Do I have this at a price that will make sense to that buyer? And that not only is going to make your acquisition side easier, right? And I'm not here to say, if your company's divided into like, we want to make it so easy for acquisitions. No, we also don't want to make it like they're dragging bricks up a hill. Because I'll tell you, if you take me and the other two best dispositions people in the world, right, and put me on a team where you give us crap deals all day, man, after 60 days, you're going to burn the best people in the business out. But also, the way we did in our company is we got a contract, they would ring the bell, hit the gong, whatever it was. But so the acquisition person's like, oh, I'm going to make all this money when this thing closes. But if it's not a sellable deal, then what did you do? Well, you wasted your time, you got people excited, you spent a bunch of money. So super important that everybody just understands the whole process. So So on Dispo, what we did that was different, we would re-underwrite the deal. And then, I thought back to when I first started scaling my company, and I had 3 girls that worked for me that did Dispo. I always found women were far better salespeople. And so I remember I'm getting them started, and I just started kind of relinquishing a little bit of control. So I come out of my office one day, Alex, I'm like, all right, girls. It was Taylor, Rachel, and Cassandra. I said, all right, girls, what's going on with these deals? And so they all had a couple of deals they were selling. So they started listing off what they were doing. This one was doing something, that was doing something else. This one was doing something. I'm like, girls, you're all doing like 6 things, but none of you are doing the same 6 things, and we're completely inconsistent. And no wonder why stuff isn't selling. Because what I see happening, same thing with our clients now and with my consulting clients before, was I sold my last deal on Craigslist or whatever, right? So now everything we're gonna do is focus on that. And what you need to do, it's the 80-20 rule, which incidentally comes from as a real estate, Pareto's principle. But I need to be doing all of the things that are going to sell most of my deals, right? So we narrowed it down to 10 things, right? I'm gonna do 10 things consistently over and over and over again. I'm gonna have a process. And I'm gonna do the same thing on every single deal. And I'm gonna train my team that we're gonna run that process. And this is building a business and having a process, right? So, simple stuff. I'll see if I can run through it. It was, we're going to get it on our website, right? And we can talk more about that, but you got to have some basic marketing sense on a website. And I'm sorry I'm going fast because I don't want to go too long here, but, put yourself in your buyer's position, right? So when I would send out a property, whether it was email or on the website or texted, whatever, right? When they go to that site, I want to give my buyer every bit of information they need to make a decision from the couch. Right. Yeah. And wholesalers got really lazy a couple of years ago when everything was just selling like hotcakes, and now the times are back to normal, right? It's like it kind of was before that. So if I've got a property in New York City or New York State, and I've got a buyer in California, like if they're sitting on the couch, can I give them every bit of information they need to make a decision, right? So beds, baths, square foot, how's it heated? What are the repairs? What school zone is it? Is it on the bus line? What's the, how big is the yard, right? Like what are the taxes? Like what's the HOA? Like I need to give them all of that information so they can be like, yeah, I want to get the address and get more pictures, or I don't, right? I'm going to pass on it. So we're putting it on the website, and we would only launch a property twice a week. I'm gonna give you guys some good stuff here, right? Like we would send out all properties on a Monday or on a Wednesday, right? Because here's the thing, no matter what my team would ever say, and we had as many as 6 Dispo people at one point, if I send out a property on Friday afternoon and those calls come in on Saturday, nobody's answering that phone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't give a crud what they say they're promised me they're gonna do. Nobody ever does it, right? So here's my philosophy on Dispo. Shock and awe, right? When I release a property, it's like a grand opening. I want to put that property in front of every single possible buyer in the market, right? So I want the phones to melt. I don't want my person to be able to get up to go to the bathroom. I want that phone from the minute I hit the market with that, I want that phone just ringing, right? Because we are a high-speed wholesale company, right? We're going to do this, and then we're going to do it again tomorrow. We're going to do it again the next day. I've got to move these properties. We cannot sit and mess around with them forever. So, the way that we would do it, everything that I'm going to talk about here, happens at one time, right? So we're sending out, we're prepping the website, we're sending out the email, then we're sending out text blasts, we're sending out RVMs, posting it in Facebook groups. I had some VAs who were in every single Facebook group. And, when we knew we had a property coming up in Cincinnati, Ohio, they would go get into all the Facebook groups there, just very simple guys. Look up, just Facebook search, Cincinnati real estate investor, Cincinnati landlord, Cincinnati investor, right? You'll find them. So we would get into those groups. So that morning, we're dropping that property, right? So emails, social media, texting, RVM, every possible thing that we can do. Craigslist. I'm going to tell you guys, don't sleep on Craigslist. You'll sell one deal a month off of Craigslist. So this is what we're doing. Like, boom, this is dropping at 9 a.m. Eastern time on a Monday when we have a deal, right? If it comes in Thursday, we're waiting until Monday because that's when people are back to work. But what is that doing, right? I'm trying to just carpet bomb the landscape so that everybody who might be looking for a deal that day is going to see my deal, and that's what drives all of those calls in, right? So all of these things are easy. You can pre-prep an RVM, you can all of it is ready to go. I had a marketing person who just did that. I could probably use a VA for it now. But what does that do? That just the minute we start dropping this stuff, the calls start coming in, right? Calls and texts are coming back in. So that's what I want my team doing, right? Because everybody knows it is far easier to take an inbound call than to make a bunch of outbound calls, right? The person who calls me is going to be far more motivated than, hey, Alex, saw you were buying properties, over by 123 Main Street. Hey, saw you bought this one 6 months ago. I've got one that's a little bit cheaper. Would you be interested in looking at it? Maybe that's going to work, but maybe it's not, right? Far better when you're calling me, hey, do you got this deal? Hold on, man, my phone's ringing off the hook. Just give me, right? So
create some scarcity, some emergency.
Yeah. So again, we're doing that, every single deal, and I've got 4, 5, 6 people at a time. So we're dropping a ton of these properties all at once. And then the reason we went to doing it on Wednesday was because, if I got a deal on Tuesday, I didn't want to wait till the following Monday. So beyond that, now we're starting to make outbound calls. Once those calls, we burn through that initial flurry. Now we're, the list of buyers that we pulled and, the people we get off Investor Lift and PropStream and all that. Now my team's making outbound calls, right? And they're going out and, and tracking down, kind of concentrically, right? Like, you're the people that were closest and we're going to just work our way out. And that, that was the 80-20 rule. Like, we just did it over and over and over again every single time. My team knew what was coming. They were excited. They loved to get the calls. It really jazzed them up. And, that's how we were selling 20 plus deals a month.
I love it, man. Guys, listen to David, because a company that sells 20 plus deals a month clearly is a company that has established guidelines, playbooks, standard operating procedures. And that's really one of the things I'm taking away from our conversation is just how meticulous and detailed you are about creating systems, processes, structure that are going to be followed. And it's not just dispositions people on a team just kind of winging it, right?
Yeah.
So a couple quick follow-up questions that I think are going to probably be bouncing around in the minds of people listening or watching this is, what would you say to the mindset, right? And I was taught this in a lot of years ago, right? What would you say to the people that would say, hey, you have a buyer's list of hundreds or thousands of people, whatever it is, but 80-20, like you really just have a small group of real buyers. Now, in all honesty, we were never at the point where we were selling 20 deals a month, right? So I'm going to defer to you on this. There are people that subscribe to the mindset of like, hey, let's give our VIP buyers a heads up, quote unquote, right? Or let's give them a small window to act first, and if they don't act, then we'll send it out to the list and we'll blast it out everywhere. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but what would you say to the people that are operating with that mentality?
I would say you're wrong and you're leaving a ton of money on the table. So I get it, right? If you have 5 buyers, you can rule the world. Well, no, because here's what happens, right? I have 5 buyers. We're going to use 5 as an example, right? Okay, well, great. Well, Penelope bought 3 properties last month from me and other people. So she's not buying this month, right? Joe is on vacation because he went to Tahiti because his last deal sold a bunch of money. This guy maybe is kind of looking, but his contractor left him, and that leaves me 2 people, right? Yeah. So also here's the problem that you fall into when you've got that limited number of buyers. You start to understand that they have a very specific buy box. which is cool. You want to know that. You want to be tracking that stuff. But now let's say they only want 3-bedroom, 2-bath brick ranch houses. Well, now what do you do when you get the 1-bedroom condo? What do you do when you get the fire burned out house? What do you do when you've got, I don't know, this 5-bedroom, 7-bath house on the golf course, right?
Yeah.
So the problem is with our marketing, the nature of our marketing. Now you can be very targeted, right? If you want to do all outbound stuff, cold calling, texting, email, you can be very targeted, right? I can only pull those properties, but you're going to go through data burn very quickly because there's only so many of those, right? So in general, what we do is we do PPC, or we do bandit signs, or we do direct mail to absentee owners, right? We're throwing out that big net and we want to drag in as many leads as we can, because that's what you're going to have to do in a scaled up company. Like we ran a very large scaled up company. We burned through data, like, pull a list and skip trace them, call them, boom, you burn through 20,000 very fast. So you've got to be, if you want to run this type of company and have that kind of deal volume, you're going to need to bring in as many leads as possible that you can turn into a deal. And those 5 people, again, that's an exaggeration, but if you have a very small buyers list, you may bring in something that those people don't want, right? Or maybe some of those buyers left the market, right? Maybe not one of them's now in storage units, right? And they're not a landlord anymore, I don't know. So the goal should always be to have the biggest buyers list you possibly can. Because again, I want that phone to melt. I want 40 people calling my team. Because you know what that does too? My team sits up a little straighter in the chair and they'll be like, yeah man, hey, you're not lowballing me. I got 14 calls behind you that I got to return. If you want this deal, dude, it's 182, man. I'll send you the contract right now. What do you want to do? And when you're speaking with that kind of confidence to these buyers, it's going to make a difference. But if you're like, hey man, Alex, are you sure you couldn't do, all right, man, could you do 175? Like those are different conversations with people and they can sense that. All of these people, these buyers, this is real money. It's their $182,000, right? They are not going to spend more if they do not have to, right? Nor everybody's negotiating, right? So, I want as many people as possible interested in my deal, because the more people I have that are interested, maybe they bid it up, maybe they don't. I've never been a big proponent of highest and best, but everybody runs their company their own way. But just the more attention I have, the quicker I can get that deal sold too. Because, if you've ever seen the old I Love Lucy thing, right? Where she's at the end of the thing and, all the pies are coming down and she can't get them in the box, right? Yeah, if you're running a good company and you've got a good leads and you've got good acquisitions, like I need to sell this deal because I've got another one coming tomorrow, or 2 more or 3 more coming tomorrow, right? So that's the difference. If you get 1 deal a month, you can mess around and do all kind of fiddle around, but I want this thing sold. If I'm putting 25,000 on it, I got somebody that's going to give me that number. Boom! I'm going to send you the contract, lock it up. I'm moving on to the next one, because I don't want to lose that buyer and then mess around and then, now because I thought I could get $3,000 more. If that's what you wanted, put that number on it and offer it to people, and the first buyer who comes along and takes it, that's fine. But the reason that we kind of do all of that, we drop everything all at once, right? Is I saw my team in the early days, I sold my last deal on Facebook, so I'm going to post it on Facebook. And then they're spending time texting back and forth with people who aren't real buyers. Yep. And then, that didn't work. So 4 days later, well, let's email it. That's a good idea. Great. And then they email it and they get a couple calls, and then that doesn't work. And now it's 7 days later and like, Craigslist. I sold that one on Craigslist last month. Let me try that. And then that doesn't work. And they're trying these strategies one at a time. And all of a sudden, before you know it, right, time's up. We're like Cinderella at the ball, man. Like these contracts all have an expiration date on them. They do not go forever, right? Time kills all deals. So that was where we just kind of figured this out. Shock and awe, that is something that works. And is it fancy? You're like, oh, that's not that genius at all. I'm like, well, do it.